Hello and welcome. I'm Dan McDermott. This is the McDermott Report. We're broadcasting live at 8 p.m. Eastern from Front Royal and Lynchburg, Virginia. Joining me, as she does on Mondays and Wednesdays now, her new schedule is Emily Williams. Emily, so glad to have you with us. Welcome.
Nice to be here, Dan.
All right, so we have a action-packed show today. There's a lot of drama going on between Michael Arrington at TechCrunch and Arianna Huffington at the Huffington Post and AOL and all this stuff. But we're going to talk about that in just a moment. First, I want to talk about your favorite new website, Glenn Beck's new TV show, which is online only. Now, while I applaud his business model, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see how it does, I'm curious. I know you've checked it out. Did you subscribe right away, or are you waiting 30 days first and getting the trial? Or 15? It's only 15 days first trial, right?
14, actually.
14 days?
Yep.
That's interesting. So what do you think? Glenn Beck, of course, Fox News host. I stand corrected. Ex-Fox News host. Now he's going solo. He still has a very popular radio show. And I remember Rachel Maddow, who's no right-winger on MSNBC, saying that she used to listen to him and that he does a great radio show. And I've listened to him, and he is a lot better on the radio than I thought he was on TV, because the TV show, in my opinion, was a real downer. The world's coming to an end tomorrow. Get storable foods and guns, that kind of thing, and buy lots of gold in the ads. But what are your impressions of this as a business move? And just what's your idea of the gist of the whole thing? What do you think?
Well, it should be interesting to see if it actually makes him any money. I think that he lost a lot of supporters when he did the television show, that it got a little crazy. But my opinion on the radio show is I've only listened to it a couple times, but every time I listen, I turn it off eventually, and not because of his politics, but just because of the amount of advertisements it contained. I mean, it's full of just product plugs, and a lot of the advertisements are actually voiced by Glenn himself, and it just makes it kind of hard to determine when he's actually seriously talking about something and when he's plugging a product. But I'm not sure if the internet site is going to have those same product plugs, but if you're going to be paying, $5 or $10 a month for it, I would hope it didn't.
I don't think there's something wrong with product plugs. I mean, Paul Harvey used to do it. The Paul Harvey News and Comment, brought to you by Hoover, America's name in vacuum cleaners, and then True Value hardware stores. I mean, I don't think that's anything wrong with that, because it's very transparent, right? He says, page 2, and then he says, okay, now I'm in ad mode. And that's the way it used to be, because remember when TV started, it was a bunch of radio guys, right? Because there weren't that many women in those days. It was radio guys, because they all wanted, you're listening to NBC radio, and then they invented television, and so naturally they just wanted to take the big stars of radio and put them on this new medium, television, and it was very common in radio, still is. I used to do a radio show here in Front Royal every day, and I would read ads. They would give them to me. And I often didn't know what they were until right before the show. I didn't write them or anything, but I would just stop the news or whatever, or the talk show, and say, by the way, did you know about the local wine shop or the local gift store, whatever? I don't think there's anything wrong with that, as long as it's transparent, as long as it's not hidden. Like if you were covering GE and secretly owned GE stock, I would be much more concerned about that than if there's a clearly labeled ad. I mean, guys got to make a buck.
This really isn't like a journalistic, or any sort of statement. It was just I personally could not get through his show because of the amount of ads. I mean, there's nothing wrong with putting ads on the radio. Like, it's the way it survives financially. It's just, I found that the ratio of content to ads was just incredibly hard to bear. But this new site, I guess, for people who like Glenn Beck and like listening to his stuff, might be a great thing, but it's a little pricey for just online content. I mean, $9 a month or $10 a month is what I'm paying for Netflix right now, and I doubt that Glenn Beck's content is can be compared to that. So we'll see. We'll see if he does it well. I mean, I just noticed that there's a option to give it as a gift, so maybe he'll benefit from hipsters doing it ironically to their friends.
How much? It's $4.95 basic, right? But you get 14 days free, and then there's the basic, then there's a premium. And I think with premium, what do you get for premium? But it's $10 a month.
Yes, $10 a month for the premium, and there's it looks like there's 3 or 4 other shows that you get. You also get the video broadcast of the radio program with the premium. He's going to have other exclusive content. The $5 a month gets you the daily show on weekdays. So, and that's about it from the looks of it.
Of course, if the world's coming to an end tomorrow, $10 a month isn't that bad, you know. I don't know. I don't know. I can't take him seriously.
It's really hard to.
I think he knows he's. I mean, some people are entertainers, like O'Reilly. Like, okay, let's analyze all the Fox lineup. Sean Hannity. I've had communication with him, and he is a sincere guy. He believes what he says, right? And he is a showman, especially on the radio or something. And he knows that when he gets some guy on TV or the radio and they're advocating every woman in America should be forced to wear a burqa or be executed, he knows that that's inflammatory and the guy's an idiot. And the guy probably knows that he's full of it and he's trying to get on television, right? So it's a little game. So everyone knows what's going on. And I hope that the viewers know what's going on. But alas, you know, and then O'Reilly, who I would be afraid to go on his show because I find him very intimidating and scary. But he has an interesting show every night, right? And his topics are great, and he's a terrific interviewer. And when he sits there and interviews the president or whatever, he does a very good interview. He's probably the most arrogant guy on television, but he's very good at what he does. He's their best host, in my opinion. And then, but Glenn Beck just didn't seem to fit into that because basically the mode is the news is pretty straightforward on Fox, right? I think Shepard Smith, I really have no idea what his political views are. I would guess he's middle of the road. Maybe he's like someone who voted for Bush twice, then voted for Obama, out of disgust of 6 years of nonstop war and the WMDs that didn't exist, blah, blah, blah. But I'm not really sure. He might be like an Obamacan. I don't know. But I like that I don't know. You know what I mean? But the talk show hosts are clearly, all but wearing, an elephant pin on their lapel. And so, but it's cool because any intelligent person realizes what that is. It's basically it's a network by and for conservatives, and I think that that's a good thing. Just like by and large, most of the political commentary, like on NPR, tends to be left of center, and there are all sorts of different. And it's a private endeavor. I mean, Fox, anyone's entitled. You could be a communist or a right wing or a socialist or fascist, whatever. If you want to start your network up and it's privately funded, that's America, God bless you. So, and Glenn Beck is entitled to his First Amendment freedoms and he exercises them very effectively. And even though, they said, he's, his ratings are down, whatever, he got millions of people, which is a lot for a cable news network. I think even at his low point, he was beating most of the CNN lineup and all of the MSNBC lineup, although MSNBC is kind of coming forward. And there's an audience for this sort of thing. There's an audience, but is it they believe him and they're all buying gold and guns and they're, waiting for the world to end and, the scary Kenyan in the White House, all that stuff? Or is it more of a cult of personality, if you will? In other words, he's just a charming, interesting guy. He clearly is an interesting guy and he's fun to watch and he's very different. And he can fill an hour, and he does his thing. So is it more about him and whatever he says, isn't as important, or is it more the message, which seems to change and is hard to pigeonhole or categorize? I don't even know exactly what you would call him. It's kind of like describing Elton John or Billy Joel's music to someone as it's almost they're almost their own genre, if you will. They're not really rock or pop, or you know what I mean? It's kind of a different thing. What do you think?
I guess. I mean, it's hard to tell whether the people that follow Glenn Beck now still take him seriously. I think I don't know. I won't be subscribing to his website, but then again, I've yet to subscribe to the New York Times website, and I read them all the time. So,
how do you get by? Do you have a sneaky way to get by their limit? Do you just
no?
Do you tweet
Ryan and
the
I
link?
Ryan and I just fight it out for whoever gets the most articles each month. We've been waiting to. We'd like to subscribe to get actual physical newspapers at our home, but because of where we live, it has to come through the mail, so it's not like up to date news really. So
I think I hit the limit once. I hit it on, but only on one device. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was a phone or the laptop or something, because I get it on all sorts of different things. And one time I hit the limit. I don't think there's a limit. Like if Drudge links to something, I think they would allow maximum clicks on that. You know what I mean? Because that's to their advantage, because they're introducing their product to new users.
It's just directly through their site, and it's 30. Okay. I think 30 articles a month.
I don't go there once a day.
Yeah, but we run out really quick.
You'd be in trouble if there was a limit on NPR listening. I know you would be in doo-doo.
That's the radio, man, and you can't keep the free radio down. I don't know. That's I don't know what I'd do on my car rides if there was a limit. Although we do, those pledge drives, they definitely get you to pay for it.
Man, I know. I don't miss Lynchburg for that reason, because mini rant alert. In Lynchburg, I love the McLaughlin group, right? I love watching those guys just scream at each other, and you can barely hear what they're saying, but it's awesome. And in Lynchburg, the local television, the PBS thing, WBRA, Blue Ridge PBS, it's awful. And when they do their pledge drives, they totally suspend McLaughlin group. I think they show it at like 6 a.m. Wednesday or something. It's taped Friday, right? Well, what the hell value is a news program, time perishable content, 5 days after the fact, and who's going to get up early on? I mean, they should pick a time and run it. It's not like the NBC nightly news. I don't want to watch last week's nightly news, right? Because it's stale, and it's just it's an important program. I think it's great, but you got to watch it, kind of when it's done. And here in D.C., they run it Friday night, and then they run it Sunday morning, although sometimes it gets preempted, and I don't know. But, the PBS stations are much better run here than they are out of Roanoke and Charlottesville or wherever that's from. But that's a whole different topic. That was just a mini rant. All right, so we've solved the thing. I think he'll get some money. I think it'll be interesting to see if there's any kind of publicly released figures on how many people subscribe. I'm sure he'll get a lot of folks to sign up for the trial to see what's up, just like you probably did. Did you watch?
No.
Why didn't you give your personal information to Glenn Beck's hackable data cloud, Emily?
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly what I wanted.
So we'll see. I think he'll get a lot of people to sign up and check it out, and then whether they stay or not. It's not a lot of money, really, because I would guess most of you're in your 20s, you're starting out in your career. Most folks I don't think you're the stereotypical Glenn Beck viewer, right? I think folks who are into that probably are, I would guess, older, I don't know, pretty good income. I mean, I'm not sure. I don't know how you'd categorize his viewers. That'd be an interesting question.
If you use members of the Tea Party as an example of the demographic, which I'm sure is a large chunk of his viewership, they tend to be, upper middle age, upper middle class. So, yeah, I think that you're right, that the people who do listen to Glenn Beck probably do have the $10 a month to spend on him.
Yeah, that's $10 more than you're going to spend on him, though, because you're not a team player. I am interested in the business model, though, aren't you? I mean, as a fellow internet podcaster, broadcaster, netcaster, whatever you want to call it, it's going to be interesting to see if this works for him, because I guess he's not relying on a primarily advertiser model, because I can tell you, all of our revenue comes from print. the newspapers combined, one issue of the newspapers, one issue of any of my 3 newspapers generates more gross and net, if it's of the profitable ones, but it generates more money than all of the websites, and I have a dozen for 20 years. I mean, there's no comparison. It's no comparison. There's still not. They keep talking about online advertising grew by 70% or 300%. Okay, it grew from 3 cents to 5 cents. It's still compared to the $2 from the new print. I mean, it's dramatic difference. And television is a lot of money, and radio's less but significant. But there's just not a lot of money online yet, and it's definitely a niche audience. And if he can make money from it, it'll be interesting to see if other folks can, because there are newspapers that can charge, like the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, especially if it's a niche thing like good financial advice people will pay. And Politico, I was surprised. What did you think when Politico, just to throw a quick topic here, when Politico started Politico Pro, which is very expensive, I think it's a couple grand or more a year, for inside political stuff. I could see that working because for 2 reasons. One, the big companies that donate money to the politicians and the big organizations that donate money to the politicians might pay for that kind of inside stuff, and I'm guessing it's tailored to that kind of audience because that's where they get their money. And second, anybody who is trying to get coverage from Politico, right? If you're an upcoming politician or a consultant or whatever, and you're trying to grease the skids to gain access to get quoted in stories and stuff, I'm guessing you might buy that subscription because your absence will be conspicuous. But I'm not to question anyone's integrity. I'm just saying I'm wondering if what the motivation will be, because to charge that much money for a political story seems crazy, but maybe it's not for a inside the Beltway publication. And ironically, I remember I've got a friend of mine. He used to work for the Post, and he went to Politico, and now he's a kind of a big shot there. And I had a conversation with him. I looked at their stuff, and I saw their publication. I think their papers, I think it's 17,000 circulation or so. It's pretty small, and they only print when Congress is in session. But it's free. It's daily, Monday through Friday, I think. But almost all their money comes, even though the site online is huge nationally, but their paper is only 17,000. Which is pretty small. That's like the Lynchburg Times, which you're the main political writer for. It's about the same circulation as the Lynchburg Times. But all their money comes from that 17,000 circulation newspaper. The printed version, only seen by, 40,000 people, if you go by the 2.2 average per paper. But all their money comes from that, not online, because there's just no money online. Even though, millions and millions of people read the website, and only 40,000 or so read the print paper. All their profit and all their gross revenue comes from the print paper. I mean, it just shows you how dramatic. That's an example everyone can understand, because anybody interested in politics looks at Politico. All right, let's. We're good with Glenn Beck, right?
Yeah, I think so.
We're done. All right, let's do Arrington. What do you think? Did you look at the links? Because I think I teased this with you a week ago. Have you been following this at all? Do you want to intro this, or do you want me to intro this?
You can intro it. I've been following it a little bit, but I jumped on pretty late, so I wasn't there as it unfolded quite.
All right. In general, TechCrunch is a very popular technology blog. In fact, if you look at if you Google the top 100 blogs, Huffington Post is number 1, and number 2 is TechCrunch. It's run by Michael Arrington. Or was run by Michael Arrington. He started it in his living room, and it grew, and then he sold it, I think, in 2009 for $30 million or 30-some million dollars to AOL. And then AOL later went on to buy for a lot more money the Huffington Post, which is the number 1 blog. And disclosure, I blog for the Huffington Post. I do not receive money from them, but I occasionally post stuff on there. And I like that. I like Huffington Post. I like I love TechCrunch. I like Michael Arrington's stuff. I think it's great. And so what happened was Tim Armstrong, who's the CEO of AOL, which is now the CEO of the parent company that owns Huffington Post and TechCrunch, they announced that Michael Arrington was going to start a venture capital fund that would invest in startups. And that's what TechCrunch does. It writes articles about startups. And so at the time they announced that TechCrunch would still cover, I forget how they said it, but it wasn't said well. And but they said that Michael Arrington would still write for TechCrunch. And then Arianna Huffington said that that he was no longer editor or had editorial control of TechCrunch, something like that, because when he sold it to AOL, he was still the guy in charge. Sort of like MySpace, Tom Anderson was still in charge when he sold MySpace, and then was eased out later or quit or whatever. But anyway, so then there was all this drama and all these posts. And one thing I love about TechCrunch is they are straight up honest, and they'll, if they want to moan and groan or gripe, whatever, they do that in public, right on the page. And there were all these really interesting posts. There was a lot of drama. And so now it apparently seems that Arrington is out. He's still in charge of Crunch Fund. And AOL is the biggest investor. And what I find interesting, Emily, is that it's like, who's in charge? Because Arianna Huffington said that he was done. And she is the overlord, to use the term that TechCrunch came up with, of TechCrunch as the main editor of all the editorial content on AOL, which includes TechCrunch and Huffington Post. So Arianna Huffington said that he was out, and then now he's out. But Tim Armstrong, who's the CEO of AOL that owns all this stuff, so he's Arianna's boss. He's announced that the initial announcement was that he was still involved and still going to write stuff, and that AOL is the main investor in this group. So this is a whole weird situation. But in retrospect, it seems logical that you would say, if you're investing in these companies that you cover, you have to divorce yourself from the coverage. What's your initial take on this very weird story?
I think that the lack of transparency made this a larger story than it could have been. I mean, this could have been very simple if they had just come out and said what was going to go on to begin with. But I think one of the reasons there wasn't a lot of transparency is I think AOL hadn't made up their minds themselves about how they were going to handle the situation. And probably the biggest reason they were having a hard time making that decision is that from everything that I've read, TechCrunch is very much, Michael Arrington's baby. And most of the scoops and all of the good, early information that TechCrunch gets is a result of his years of, accumulating sources and what have you. So without him and without his editorial prowess, if you will, the blog just doesn't hold the same credibility, the same weight, and the same resources that it did before. So from what I read, AOL was trying to find a way to still include him and to include his experience and those sources and that, those ins to the industry without, appearing like they were funding the stuff they were writing about, which, there just was no way of doing that. And someone should have foreseen that before they put him in charge of that tech fund to begin with. There's plenty of people out there that are capable of handing out money to startup companies, but there aren't a lot of people that can form journalistic relationships with companies and people and get insider information like that. So I think they definitely came down on the wrong side with him. It probably ended up being his decision because they offered him the fund to begin with, but I think it was a bad decision on AOL's part to do that.
Let's talk about Michael Arrington. He's a brilliant writer, and he's funny, and he's witty. He's another guy I would be very scared, be honest, you'd be very scared if he went after you in a post, because he's really good. If you had a company and he thought you were an idiot, he would straight up say, And I remember one example that was recently posted as a link in one of these stories about this by one of the TechCrunch people. He went to a convention of these folks who monetize the games on Facebook. And he said, I think you're corrupt. And he straight up said this at the convention. I said, I think it's corrupt. When you're running ads for companies that say, play this game or vote on this, and then you go there, and then all of a sudden the person has a $9.95 a month charge to find the results of a poll or whatever. And he straight up said, this is corrupt, and you guys are wrong to do this. And you are, forcing the good people out because they don't get the same results from the site that you do because they're not playing these stupid games. I mean, they're not, playing these dishonest tactics, and you're giving everybody a bad name. And this woman, cussed him out, and it was this very interesting video. And then he came back and said, well, may I respond to her response? And it was just classic Arrington. He just doesn't care. He'll get right in your face. I think he's a big, burly guy, right? But he's just, and he's a 41-year-old guy, and he's so smart, and he's such a good writer, and I have a lot of affection for the site and for his writing. I've never met Michael, but I think it's a sad story. If he starts another blog, I guarantee you, I will read it, and it will be a hit, and it will probably attract. There will be a bidding war for some of the top guys like M.G. Siegler and Eric Schoenfeld. There'll be a bidding war. Schoenfeld will probably stay because he's now the head honcho, so he's got a cushy job. But that'll be interesting to see what happens. The only thing that will probably prevent that is that the new venture fund is largely funded by AOL. And so he wouldn't want to screw his, but I don't think it's a whole lot of money, but I don't know. I find it fascinating to watch. I was shocked because this came out of left field. And I remember someone asked a question on Google Plus, which we both are getting more into. I'm a big fan of Google Plus, and that's what our Friday show is about. But they said, it was a week ago, they said, who will still have a job next week? Arianna Huffington or Michael Arrington? And I thought that's a fun, loaded, topical question. And my money was on Arianna Huffington because even though basically Tim Armstrong had to choose between Huffington and Arrington, he had just put all this faith in Huffington to be in charge of all the editorial content, and it would have been a huge embarrassment. This whole thing's an embarrassment for everybody involved, but it would have been a much worse embarrassment for AOL had Huffington resigned or, something after basically all the editorial content is under her wing, and she was put out as the flagship for AOL. So, we'll see. And I don't know. I think it's a sad thing that's happened. I think it was, in retrospect, a dumb idea to try to have a venture fund investing in companies and to simultaneously be writing ostensibly objective posts about these companies and covering them. Because you could be the most honest guy in the world. You could be the guy who's harder on the companies that you like or know or support. You could be harder on those companies than the companies you don't. It doesn't matter. Perception is reality in the news business. And if people know that you're investing in certain companies and not others, there will always be questions. They will never be dealt with. They'll never be put aside. They'll never be answered satisfactorily about whether you are being objective, whether you're ignoring companies that aren't being funded by your entity, or whether you're highlighting other ones. There's no escape from that, and I think Arianna saw that, and she was the smart person in the room, and I think that her posts, the last two posts today, were one on TechCrunch saying AOL has released the following statement: Michael Arrington is, whatever, no longer at TechCrunch or AOL, but he's going to focus on his fund, which is, and they put in that same release that AOL is still the main money funder behind the fund, and we wish him well. We look forward to this, but he's out the TechCrunch door. And then Arianna wrote this thing, basically avoiding all the topic, basically avoiding all the controversy, and just saying that the Wall Street Journal was wrong in their characterization of this as a bitch fight or whatever. When it wasn't about personalities. It wasn't about Arrington versus Huffington. It was about ethics or the appearance of impropriety, blah blah blah. So I guess I don't know. it's had a surprisingly calm ending, I guess. Because, I mean, this was all on fire, and then finally it's answered, and it's kind of like, well, I wish him well, whatever he does, I'll be there. I don't know. So I guess it's done. So it's done.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, this is really, I have never been a huge fan of AOL, or, they're definitely one of those companies that I put up there with, Yahoo, trying to hang on to what they can still. And this is it just goes to show that the organization within the company is just, and the leadership is just not where it needs to be to remain competitive. I mean, making decisions like this is just, it was dumb, and it led to another bad piece of media for the company. And, maybe Ariana will be able to do something with it, but, we'll see, I guess.
You've got two strong personalities, and probably, I'm totally speculating, probably what happened, I know we got to move on, probably what happened is that initially Arrington, very strong, very persuasive, very intelligent guy with a good track record, right? He's usually right. Said, this will work fine. I've always done this. I've always been very transparent. On my own site, it tells you I invest in this company, this company, this company. I write about them, and I say in the post that I invest in them. And so Tim's like, okay, cool, let's do this. This makes sense. And then Ariana came to him, another strong, intelligent personality, and said, with a great track record, and said, look, you can't do this. You can't have a news site and be investing in certain companies and covering those companies along with their competitors. You can't do that. And so Tim's like, oh, well, you're right too, but I've already said this, and then it blew up, and then, I think it was a news story that fed on itself, and it was interesting, and but I think in the end, as much as I love Michael Arrington, and I hope he starts another blog, and I'll read it, I think it makes sense that he can't do both. And you've been to journalism school, so and I haven't, so you know better than me, better than I do about this. So anyway, okay, all right. Rick Perry, Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. I think that's designed to provoke, right? And he was universally criticized by both sides, and everyone's like, oh, everyone wrote him off right after the debate. And I think we live blogged the debate when he said it, or reaffirmed it from his book. And I said, I remember saying right away, I said, he's the only guy telling the truth. And I think people are smarter than they give him credit for. It's true. I'll give you some stats. I'm going to throw it to you, Emily. But when they start, and I've said this before, and these are becoming more commonly known as this becomes a subject of debate. But when Social Security started, there were 6 workers for every retiree, and there was an average life expectancy of 5 or 6 years on Social Security. Now there are 6 retirees for every worker, and the average life expectancy, I think, is 18 years. And one final point before I throw it to you is I had lunch with my parents today, and I was discussing this, and my dad said, Social Security was never designed to be your end-all, catch-all retirement plan. It was meant to be a supplemental thing that came after the Great Depression and all that. But I think he's right. I think it is a Ponzi scheme in that if it's left alone, it's it's going to run out of money straight up, and that they have to make some changes, not to people in it or about to get into it, but folks like you and me who have 20, 30, 40, 50 years to worry about before we have to deal with it. To say we have to wait an extra 3, 5, 7 years or whatever, or we have to pay a little more or something, just to make the numbers work. It doesn't seem to me that that's dramatic or should be as earth-shattering as they're trying to portray it. Am I wrong?
Well, I think the biggest problem with Rick Perry and his use of the word Ponzi scheme is it's just inaccurate for what he's trying to get across. I mean, if it was a Ponzi scheme, the government would intentionally not want to give the money back to us, and that's just not what's going on. The other problem with it is that, and this was abundantly apparent when he brought it up in the debate and all of his competitors responded, is that by just saying it's a Ponzi scheme, he's not putting forward a plan or a way to fix it. He's, just making inflammatory statements again and again, whereas his competitors all, bucked up and came up with, we need to reform, we need to do this, we need to do that. And, it's a much more productive way of going about politics to actually talk about how you're going to change things and not just say this is bad, I guess. And, it really, I understand that he wanted to make a splash, and using a word like the phrase like Ponzi scheme is obviously something that Americans are going to react to based on, recent history with Bernie Madoff, et cetera. But it's more inflammatory rhetoric that it dilutes the process. It's not giving people a good idea of what's really going on. And, if you want to start thinking that the American government is just duping you out of your money, go for it. I mean, sure, there's plenty of people that think that, but I mean, and I am, 25, and I know that there's problems with Social Security, but, it's not something that's going to be fixed by just whining about it. It's something that's going to be fixed by people getting up and doing stuff, so.
I'm sorry, I have my mic turned down. Yeah, I think this is interesting, and this is a comment in our little cheat sheet that we put out, and anyone can edit it. And I'm not sure who put this in here. One of the folks editing it. Interesting discussion. This is the what's good for the goose is not good for the gander argument. Social Security is a Ponzi scheme by legal definition if it were run by private individuals. However, threatening bodily harm or property harm to collect protection fees is racketeering. Using force to make others do what you want is coercion, and the government holds a monopoly on doing these things that are considered immoral and illegal for private citizens. I don't know about the first two sentences there, but the last one, the government holds a monopoly on doing things that are considered immoral and illegal for private citizens. That's true. The best example is you can go into a 7-Eleven and buy a Virginia State Lottery ticket. But if you have, your own numbers game with your friends, then you're racketeering or committing a big crime. But it's okay for the state to have a tax on stupid people, or, a Virginia State Lottery. And so, yeah, they do
I mean, there's plenty of legal, regulated gambling that happens in the private sector, too. I mean,
true, but that's okay. Yeah, like private, like in Virginia, in a lot of states, a lot of the fraternal organizations or nonprofit groups are allowed to have bingo and that sort of thing. But it is, there are a lot of things that the state recognizes as a vice of some sort, or for whatever moral reason you can't do it. But then they can conduct the same activity, or they can choose certain organizations that can conduct the same activity if they deem it so, or if their lobbyists donate money to the right politicians, they can make it happen. So yeah, I don't know. I just think the numbers don't add up, and I'm glad that he's addressing it. I'm surprised he's addressing it, and I think I think it's gutsy, because it'd be a lot easier for him not to do so. And I think that all these folks who have just immediately wrote him off over this are wrong, because I think people are smarter than that. So anyway, all right, 9/11. I remember when Osama bin Laden was killed, met justice, met his fate, whatever you want to call it. All these college kids showed up all of a sudden in front of the White House, right? I think it was George Washington University, and I remember someone, I think it was Jeff Jarvis, made the point that these guys, they're 18, 19, 20 years old. They were 8, 9, 10 years old when 9/11 happened. And while for me, I'm 43, I was 23 when 9/11 happened, or 33. I had 75% of my life was done, and up till now, and so I have, it's a phase I've gone through. But for these folks who are 18, 19, 20 years old, or yourself in your mid-20s, it's like your whole adult life and your teen years were all shaped by this. And your boogeyman was Osama bin Laden. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are. And once I didn't want to watch. I skipped all the Sunday shows because I didn't want to get depressed and angry all over again. I'd seen all those pictures. I was there. I know. And I think it's important that we recognize these anniversaries. And that's why we're doing this segment. But was like, man, I don't want to get angry and depressed all over again. Because that SOB hurt us even more than he realizes he did or tried to this day. We're sitting here suing each other over pat downs by just all this stuff. It's because of this guy and this crazy movement. What are your thoughts as a 20-something who was a young teenager when this happened? What are your thoughts on this 10th anniversary of September 11th, 2001?
Well, let's see. So I was a sophomore in high school when 9/11 happened. And I was really thinking about this question once I saw your document and the fact that you were going to ask me about it. And I honestly think that the one thing that 9/11 has changed for me growing up all of my adult life with it is the idea that, America is just part of the rest of the world, I guess. Terrorist attacks are happening all around the world all the time now. It's a reality of the century that we're living in. And I think that having it happen in the middle of America, in the heart of America, and having an attack like that on our soil, it makes you realize that we're not exempt from the violence and we're not exempt from, the fighting and what have you. And I guess you could argue that, Pearl Harbor was an attack on American soil. And yes, it was, but it also happened, at the very extreme of what is still American soil. I think that 9/11 happening in New York City really affected everyone in every walk of life and was, closer to home, both literally and figuratively. So I think that it was an awakening, I guess, to what can happen. The other thing that it's really influenced for me is that not only did 9/11, make us consider security and all these things, but the response and everything that happened afterwards was messy. It was everything on every side. We didn't get a lot of straightforward answers right away. There were a lot of people that were mistrusting the government as a result. And that mistrust of the government has gone, from far left to far right since then. And I think that my generation, 9/11, gave us an excuse to be very aware of politics and to become very aware of the greater world. Really, it made it important to learn about the Middle East, which I would say that the Middle East has been important in the political scheme of things for a while, but having an extremist group from there attack the United States made it, even more relevant and made it so shocked people into learning about them and their culture. And, there's a whole slew of influences that I think had 9/11 not happened, things would be quite different. So that's how it's influenced me. I'm not sure that I have the same reaction as, say, people who were, just learning how to, be aware of the news and the world. These people that were 10 or so when it happened. I think that, 9/11 was like a coming of age, I guess, for my generation.
It was, and it was, at least, you had a few cognizant years, in the semi-adult world before it happened to you. And it affected, it caused so many things, directly or indirectly. Obviously, it caused, 2,500, 3,500 deaths in America. And more deaths than the American Revolution, which I think was in the 2,500 range. But so many things we did afterward, like the invasion of Iraq based on WMDs and stuff, really all that would never have happened but for 9/11. You know, you can blame faulty intelligence, you can blame Bush. None of that would have been on the plate if it were not for Osama bin Laden and his group and what they did. So many mistakes that we made, so many things that we've endured since then, so many liberties we've given up, so many scars on the face of America around the world, on our image. All these things are attributed to that. And it was this, I mean, you talk about effective terrorism. That guy really, you know, he nailed us good. He really did. And I don't know. It's just like I said, when I think about this stuff, I get upset and I get angry all over again. I don't know. I mean, there's not much to say. What's to say? You know, it happened, and we're all witnesses to the aftermath. But out of respect to those who died and the everything else, you know, I wanted to address it. I wanted to acknowledge it, and even though I don't like to, because it just, like I said, it upsets me, and you know, I've been through it. We all went through it, and the aftermath. So there you have it. All right, we got one complicated topic which we can go into. Let's do it briefly, and then the interesting topic about the newspaper and the Android thing. But first, child support. Again, a disclosure. My friend, who you know also in Lynchburg, is the one who introduced the bill in Virginia, that the so-called deadbeat dads law, but the whole concept of basically a debtor's prison for child support. How are we doing on that? Is that working? Does this make sense? What do you think, Emily?
You know, this story, and anyone who's listening should definitely go click through to the link. It is very heavy on just the one man involved, and of course every case is different. But what it shows is that, and for people who haven't clicked through, the idea is that this man who served in the armed forces, I forget which branch, ended up coming home, being done with his term, and then not being able to get a good enough paying job to pay his $400 a month in child support. He went to jail for 4 years, I believe, as a result. And one of the most relevant things that they say in the interview, they actually interview his dad. His dad says, the judge asked him, have you been looking for work? And obviously he couldn't be looking for work while he was in jail. So, it's a problem that we are putting people in jail that can't find jobs. Obviously, that we need to do something about people. The idea of wanting to penalize deadbeat dads and or mothers, because it could go either way, for not paying child support when they're not trying to pay the child support is, it's valid. But if, having gone through unemployment myself, you can try really hard and still at the end of the day not have a job. And it's obvious that, instead of putting these people in jail, we should be giving them jobs. If they refuse to take the job, that's a different issue. But I completely agree with the idea of the story.
Yeah, it's interesting because sometimes things that you think are a good idea, you can question. And I think this is a great. I've been pushing this for a while, and I actually a friend of mine asked me to help a political candidate, and I met the guy. He was a nice guy. He ended up not winning the nomination. But I said, one issue for you might be, what about sunsetting all laws? That every single law should have some sort of time limit, 5, 10 years, 15 years, whatever, 20 years, so that every year the legislature, instead of just passing new laws, they have to know that, okay, these X number of laws are expiring this session or next year. And so if we do not vote to reenact them, they will no longer be law. And then a new legislature in a new era has to stand up and go on the record and say, I support this bill. and it makes them stop and review it. Because I think it's pretty arrogant for any legislature to say that you should have the power to enact something that will be law in perpetuity. And there are all sorts of examples of stupid laws in the books. You can't bathe your donkey on Sunday in Georgia, or whatever. And that's a hodgepodge of things in my head, examples of this. But I think this is something that should be visited. It's basically a debtor's prison, and then we're putting this particular debt, which really isn't a debt against the kid, because you don't. In this type of circumstance, you don't pay the kid, or you don't pay the mother. I'm saying mother because 9 times out of 10 or more, it's the woman has the custody. But you are paying the state, because the state pays the child support, and then the father or the deadbeat parent pays the state back, right? So really it's a debt to the Commonwealth of Virginia or the Commonwealth of Massachusetts or whatever state you're in. And they're saying that this particular debt is a crime, not a civil matter, and that you will go to jail if you don't pay it. Clearly it will be a motivator. If you owed me $50, I'm not going to. I don't have the power to report you to the credit bureau for a personal loan of $50. So Emily's like, well, I got to pay my mortgage, I got to pay my student loan, I'll pay Dan next month, But if you knew that I could put you in jail, you'd be very motivated to pay it, right? So it's clearly an effective tool. But whether it's effective after, so many years of implementation, whether it's right, whether it is the best thing for society, I don't know. So I guess we'll let better policy wonks than we are, look into all the statistics instead of just this one anecdotal story. But it's a good topic we should look at and do some more research into. All right, so we got a comment in the chat room on Justin.tv. He said, I have a friend of mine who's a mom, and she went to jail for 4 months. So I stand corrected. It's not just a deadbeat dad's thing. It sometimes it's and I don't like that term. I mean, it could be any number of reasons, and I don't know the circumstances. I don't know if it's like if you're unemployed in Detroit and you're an auto worker and you're 70 and you had a kid when you were 60, and there's just no way you can pay the bill working at Walmart, and there's 15,000 people trying to get that Walmart job greeting. And I don't know if it's that kind of like sympathetic figure, or if it's some drunk guy who just couldn't care less, you know what I mean, and just like screw it, I'm not paying the BI whatever, you know what I mean. I don't know if it's like a sympathetic or unsympathetic figure. It depends, but it's a messy thing, and I don't know. I'm not sure what the solution is. I think it's easy to just say, oh, this is an evil character, and let's throw the book at him, and it's for the children, when really it's not. I mean, the kids are paid for through the state, and then you're paying the state, and we're elevating this particular form of debt to a government institution as jailable, and I think it's worth a look. All right, this is interesting. A newspaper, again, we've got a link to it in our show notes here, but a newspaper to sell subsidized Android tablets. That's a whole unique thing. What do you think about this on the face value? And then if anyone's listening who's in a band, I'm going to give you $1 million promotion idea as soon as Emily's done. Emily, what do you think about this whole concept here?
Well, regardless of whether or not this works, and I'm going to say this first before I go into whether or not I think it's going to work. I think it's great to see a paper doing something innovative to sell their product digitally. It's hard. It's hard in a world where the mantra has become newspapers are dead, to come up to break through with ideas like this and get support for them. But I think that kudos to them for coming up with the idea. Now, as to whether it will work, I'm not sure that making someone buy a piece of technology and then paying a subscription fee is the best way to go about this. But maybe it will, and maybe they'll learn from what they're doing and develop a better way to do it. It's unfortunate that they're using an off-brand tablet. maybe they would have been cool if they could have collaborated with HP maybe when they were trying to get rid of their non-successful ones. But, it's anyone's game at this point. Ideas like this are the only thing that are going to keep newspapers going, and the more the merrier. If we put a lot of good ideas out there, eventually one will catch on, and real news will be at the forefront again. So let's hope to see other papers doing stuff like this.
I think it's a good idea, and it's good for Android, obviously. Anytime you can take a product like this that is expensive to build and figure a way. If you have content and you're trying to get that content out to people, and you're trying, man, I'm paying all these, money for ads, and I'm getting lost in the content overload ecosystem, and I'm trying to get people to pay attention to me. Well, here's a great idea. If you're a band, okay, I have about an idea every 6 minutes, and 90% of them are terrible ideas. About 1% are great ideas, and about 9% are. But this is a great idea. If you're a band, right? I mean, garage band. Teenage kids. You got a good sound, whatever. Do this. Get some MP3 players, some kind of iPod type things, and buy a dozen of them, and hide them on Main Street in your town, right? Under a park bench, whatever. I mean, hide them somewhere on Main Street, a dozen of them, and then do a press release and get somebody who's good at writing press releases to write a press release that your band has released, is giving away a dozen MP3 players loaded with your music. And it will be unique and interesting, and whoever does this first will be a national story. But I'm telling you, this is a good idea. And then hide them, right? And then your cost is what, $200 or $300? But what would it cost you to get that kind of publicity? And then you'll have people looking around for your for the MP3 players, and you're going to get all this publicity, and people are going to be like, well, this is an interesting news story, and then they're going to check your band out on YouTube or what have you, and they're going to say, oh, this is a cool band, or this is awful music, whatever. But you're going to get a lot of attention, and it's going to cost you what, $200 or $300. But something like that is just, and this, it's kind of the same thing where this newspaper is going to do this, and they're going to get some national attention for it. But also, it's good for tablets, and it's good for any sort of publisher of content. If they said, we're trying to get people to pay, we're trying to get people to, I'm sorry, I'm getting a thing on my computer. You're trying to get people to pay attention to your content, and you're trying to get this retail list price. And so if you can cut that down at whatever, and then subsidize a tablet, I think this is genius. I think it's a great idea. And I guess there was one newspaper that was going to do a custom tablet just for them. So maybe that's the solution. Maybe Glenn Beck could issue tablets out, and they would your homepage would be the Glenn Beck Show, and then Emily would rush out to her local Sprint store and buy one of these tablets.
I got nothing to say to that. I noticed that you put me up big. Maybe I'd get one for all of my friends and family to make sure that they were informed about how terrible a crisis America is in.
I threw you a softball. Williams, as they say in front row, Williams.
Do they? That's horrible.
I don't know. All right, we're done. Are we done? Do we have any other anything going on? Man, we missed the debate.
I don't think so.
And what game was it that you were all into?
The Patriots, Dan. Man, you gotta get on these things. Pats. Yeah, go Pats. I actually haven't even checked the store in a while. I closed the window because it was slowing my computer down.
What's the Pats versus who?
The Dolphins.
That. What do you Google? Current Pats score?
You go Dolphins to ESPN.com.
Give us a score update for our live.
I'm going. Maybe not. Let's do Boston.com. Yeah, this is the first game of the regular season, so it's a big deal. And hopefully the Pats are still winning.
Probably
that would be awesome.
probably a bigger deal in Nielsen ratings than even the Republican debate or even Glenn Beck's premiere episode. But we shall see. All right, hey, Emily Williams, awesome writer. Get ready to working on some news stories for the next issue of Lynchburg Times. Comes out the 19th, or the 20th, I guess. 19th for us, but 20th for everybody else. We're going to hide them on Main Street, and if you can find them, you'll get a free copy of the Lynchburg Times.
Don't tell them they're free in all the supermarkets. That ruins the whole game.
You just killed the mood, Emily. All right, Emily Williams is available on Google Plus at gplus.to/EmilyKW. I am at gplus.to/McDermott. And we appreciate very much you tuning in tonight to the McDermott Report. I'll be back tomorrow night with Mr. Brett Herbeck, the on-again, off-again Republican politician, but always the Republican, to balance out Emily's wayward NPR views, right, Emily? I didn't have you two on together for the serious pulling of hair and gnashing of teeth, the whole deal. All right, thanks so much for watching, listening, whatever. I'm Dan McDermott. I'll be back tomorrow night with another exciting episode of the McDermott Report. Y'all have a great, great evening. Go Pats.